Look at your hands right now. Press your fingertips together. Feel that, the pressure, the resistance, the solid, undeniable sensation of one part of your body making contact with another. That is the most immediate, the most certain, the most physically direct experience you have ever had. You know what touch feels like. You have known it since before you could speak. The warmth of another person's hand, the cold of a metal railing, the roughness of a brick wall, the softness of fabric. You have spent your entire life touching things, and you have never once questioned what that means because it seems so obvious that the word obvious doesn't even feel adequate. Here is the truth that is going to follow you out of this video and into every room you walk into for the rest of your life. You have never touched anything. Not once. Not your own hands pressed together just now. Not the floor beneath your feet. Not the chair you are sitting in. Not the person you love most in the world. In the most precise, most literal, most physically accurate sense of the word contact, you have never made contact with anything. And the sensation you call touch, that immediate, vivid, undeniable feeling of pressing against something solid, is not contact. It is a force acting across a gap, always, without a single exception in your entire life. Let me show you exactly what is happening when you think you are touching something. Because the actual mechanism is so strange, and so much more violent than anything you have imagined, that once you see it, the ordinary act of picking up a cup of coffee is never going to feel ordinary again. Everything you have ever touched is made of atoms. You already know this. Your hand is made of atoms. The table is made of atoms. Every object in your life is a collection of atoms arranged in particular ways. And an atom is mostly empty space. The nucleus is unimaginably small. If you scaled an atom up until its nucleus was the size of a marble, the outer edge of the atom where the electrons live would be roughly the size of a football stadium. The marble sits at the center of the stadium, and in between is almost nothing. Atoms are by volume almost entirely empty, so here you have two objects, your hand and the table, each one almost entirely empty space, each one a vast open structure with tiny particles scattered through enormous voids, and you bring them together, and you expect them to touch. But here is what actually happens. As the electrons in the outermost atoms of your hand approach the electrons in the outermost atoms of the table, they encounter something. Those electrons carry electrical charge, negative charge, and they are surrounded by an electromagnetic field that extends out from them into the space around them. As the electron clouds of your hand approach the electron clouds of the table, these fields begin to interact. And the interaction is repulsion. Like charges repel. Electron repels electron. The closer they get, the stronger the repulsion becomes. The electromagnetic force does not require contact to act. It acts across the empty space between the two sets of electrons, pushing outward, resisting the approach. And this repulsive force is not gentle. It is not a soft cushion gradually slowing your hand down. The electromagnetic force is incomprehensibly strong. Two electrons placed 1 centimeter apart repel each other with a force roughly 10 to the 42 times stronger than the gravitational attraction between them. That is not a typo. That is 1 followed by 42 zeros times stronger than gravity. At the scale of electrons, gravity is so weak it is completely irrelevant. Electromagnetism is everything. So when your hand approaches the table, what is actually happening is this. The electron clouds of your outermost hand atoms are encountering the electron clouds of the outermost table atoms, and they are being pushed apart by a force of almost incomprehensible strength, acting across the tiny gap of empty space between them. Your hand never reaches the atoms of the table. The electrons of your hand and the electrons of the table never actually meet. There is always a gap, always a distance, always that repulsive electromagnetic force filling the space between them and pushing back. The feeling of solidity, the sensation of resistance when you press your hand against the table, that is not you touching the table. That is you feeling the electromagnetic force pushing back against the approach of your hand. The hardness of the table is not a property of the atoms making contact with your atoms. It is a measure of how strongly the table's electron clouds resist being pushed together with your hand's electron clouds. What you call solid is a description of electromagnetic force. What you call hard is a description of electromagnetic force. What you call soft is a description of electromagnetic force. What you call touch in every single instance of your entire life is electromagnetic force acting across a gap. You have never touched anything. You have only ever felt electromagnetic repulsion. Now I want you to follow this thought somewhere it almost never goes because the implications go far beyond picking up coffee cups. Think about the most intimate physical experiences of your life. Holding someone's hand, embracing another person, the sensation of another human being physically present against you. You feel them, you feel their warmth, you feel their solidity. You feel in some deep and immediate and real sense that you are in contact with another person. And in the ordinary human sense of the word, you are. The contact is real as an experience. The warmth is real. The presence is real. But at the physical level, at the level of what is actually happening between the atoms of your skin and the atoms of their skin, there is never contact. There is only the electromagnetic fields of your electrons interacting with the electromagnetic fields of their electrons across the gaps between your atoms and their atoms, pushing back against each other, never actually meeting, always separated by the force that acts across distance rather than requiring closeness to do its work. The gap is almost unimaginably small, fractions of a nanometer, but it is always there, always unbridgeable. The atoms of two people in an embrace have never touched. This might seem like physics being pedantic, reducing something meaningful to something mechanical and cold, but I think it is the opposite, because here is what it actually reveals. The sensation of touch is not information about contact. It is information about force. When you hold someone's hand, your nervous system is detecting and encoding the magnitude and distribution of electromagnetic forces acting on the surface of your skin. The warmth you feel is the transfer of kinetic energy from their atoms to yours, transmitted electromagnetically as their faster-moving molecules excite your slower-moving molecules through electromagnetic interaction at near-contact distances. The pressure you feel is the electromagnetic repulsion between electron clouds integrated over the entire surface area of contact. Your nervous system is a force detection system, an electromagnetic field sensor, an instrument that has been your entire life measuring the intensity and distribution of the fundamental electromagnetic force and feeding that information to your brain, which translates it into the vivid, immediate, intimate experience you call touch. Touch is not contact. Touch is the experience of electromagnetic force at close range. Now go further, because the same truth applies to everything your body does, not just your hands. When you stand on the floor, you are not in contact with the floor. The electrons in the soles of your feet are being repelled by the electrons at the surface of the floor, and that repulsive force is what holds you up. Gravity is pulling you down. An electromagnetic repulsion between your feet and the floor is pushing you up, and the balance between those two forces is what you experience as standing. Your weight pressing down on the floor is not your atoms pressing against the floor's atoms. It is the electromagnetic fields of your atoms and the floor's atoms locked in a constant tension, gravity pulling you in, and electromagnetic repulsion pushing you out, your body hovering above the floor at a gap too small for you to sense but always physically present. When you breathe, the air molecules entering your lungs do not touch the walls of your airways. The gas molecules collide electromagnetically with the molecules lining your bronchioles, transferring energy and momentum through electromagnetic interaction without ever making true physical contact. When the oxygen crosses from your lungs into your blood, it does not pass through membranes by direct contact. The electromagnetic properties of the oxygen molecule and the properties of the hemoglobin molecule draw them together, bind them together, through electromagnetic attraction between specific parts of their electron clouds. The entire chemistry of your body, every reaction, every signal, every movement, every heartbeat, is electromagnetic interactions between molecules, and none of those molecules ever touch in the sense you originally understood the word. You are not a physical being in the physical world of contact and collision and solid touch. You are a collection of electromagnetic fields interacting with other electromagnetic fields, and the experience of contact, the entire felt sense of physical reality that your nervous system constructs from birth to death, is a representation of those electromagnetic interactions, translated by your brain into the language of pressure and warmth and hardness and softness and the unmistakable feeling of presence. The world is not made of stuff pressing against other stuff. The world is made of fields interacting with fields across distances, and the impression of solidity and contact is what that interaction feels like from the inside of a nervous system that evolved to use those feelings as information about the environment, not as accurate reports of what is physically happening at the atomic scale. This is not a reason to feel alienated from the world or from other people. It is a reason to feel something closer to awe, because what your nervous system does with electromagnetic force is astonishing. It translates the invisible mathematics of field interactions into a rich, vivid, multi-textured experience of a world full of distinct objects with different fields and temperatures and weights and resistances. It takes the monotony of a single fundamental force acting at every surface and every interface and converts it into the entire spectrum of your tactile experience of reality. Every texture, every temperature, every pressure, every embrace, all of it built from one force, acting at a distance, never making contact, and yet somehow, through the extraordinary complexity of your nervous system, producing the most immediate and certain feeling you know, the feeling of touching something real. The next time you shake someone's hand or press your feet into warm sand or run your fingers across the bark of a tree, you are not touching those things. You are feeling the electromagnetic force that those things are exerting on the electromagnetic fields of your atoms. And that force is reaching you across a gap, always across a gap. The world is always forever slightly out of reach, and you have spent your whole life feeling it perfectly anyway. That is not a small thing, that is everything. If you want to keep seeing the world for what it actually is, not what it appears to be, subscribe. That is what this channel is for.